Good morning. This is Lunch with the Arts. We're so glad you're here. And if you have a chance, if you hadn't had a chance, please make sure you're muted as you enter. And Mary Beth is going to get us started. Thank you, Mary Beth.
You're welcome, Lee. Hello there. Welcome, everyone. I'm introducing our speaker today, Phillip Kennedy Johnson. He is an Eisner-nominated writer and musician living in the Washington, D.C., Baltimore region. He is best known as the writer of Superman, Action Comics, Alien, Captain America, and Marvel Zombies, Resurrection, and is also the writer and creator of comic series The Last God from DC Black Label, Last Sons of America, Warlords of Appalachia, Smoketown, and many more. Outside of writing, Johnson has a full-time career as a sergeant first class in the United States Army Field Band of Washington, D.C., with whom he regularly tours the continental United States. Prior to joining the Army Field Band, he toured the world with the Glenn Miller Orchestra from 2004 to 2005, and has performed with the Moscow Ballet, the Dallas Opera, Washington Symphonic Brass, the Lexington Philharmonic, and the Benny Goodman Orchestra. Johnson is a devoted lover of American art forms, especially jazz, comic books, and mixed martial arts. He will fight anyone who argues that MMA comes from Brazil. And now, Phillip, I'll let you take it from here. We're so glad to have you today.
Thanks for having me. I forgot I left that saucy little bit about Brazil in there, but I stand by it. Thank you all very much for having me. It's an honor. Thanks for that great intro. I'll try to live up to it. Please ask questions. I want everyone to get what they would like to get out of this today. So if you have any questions for me, if you're a creator yourself, a writer, or a budding musician, or anything I can do to help you on a career path that you're trying to put together, please let me know that. I just want you to get your money's worth out of it. So briefly, I thought I'd start by just talking about how I fell into this super weird career. So hopefully that's of use. So, I mean, if I had to kind of boil it down, first, can everyone hear me okay? Give me a thumbs down. If not, everyone's good. I've always just pretty much done what I wanted. Like I was not an extremely good student. I was fine. I mean, I wasn't lazy. I had interests. Like I just loved making things, basically. And if something didn't interest me, it just didn't. And I was not as good a student as I might have been. And hopefully my son will be better than I was. But yeah, if I enjoyed something though, if something really interested me, it really interested me. And it wasn't enough to just consume stuff. I wanted to do it myself. Like if I loved a cartoon, or if I loved a movie, or if I loved a book, I would try to make my version of that thing myself. Like later in life, I discovered mixed martial arts, like what the UFC does. And it wasn't enough to just watch it, like with beer in my hand. I wanted to actually like do it, like that's just kind of always been my approach to life, is just to do the things I love and try to like live a really full life. So yeah, that was from my very earliest memories. My dad, I didn't live in the kind of house where, where I was getting played with very much, but my parents would read to me a good bit. And not like, I had a really unusual childhood. Like when I was really young, especially my dad did not believe in toys really. And so I would have like Lincoln Logs and stuff, but mostly it was books, and I would get read to a lot, but not even Clifford the Big Red Dog or Curious George or whatever the kids' books are, is like Macbeth or like Tom Sawyer, Huck Finn, like a lot of Mark Twain, and this stuff you'd never expect. So, other kids are getting these kid stories, and I can like recite Chaucer and stuff. It's super weird. But it did kind of give me a different appreciation of what stories were, I guess. So I would kind of make my own versions of those things. But Dad would also come home with these boxes of ripped up comics that he would get from garage sales or flea markets. And because he remembered that he himself learned how to read from comic books, and he thought they would be useful for me as well. So I did basically learn how to read from comics, and I just consumed them. Now that was the most childlike aspect of my childhood was these comics, and I just loved them. I was kind of a lonely, sad kid in a lot of ways, sometimes kind of an angry kid, but these comics, especially like Batman and Superman stories, gave me these really powerful fantasies that made my childhood way more livable. I just lived in these comic stories, and I would make my own comics too as a little kid. Just loved them, and I still loved them. I think Dad was kind of disappointed that I loved him so much, like more so than he wanted me to be the next, Thomas Jefferson or whatever. But I really just was drawn to these comic books. I also had a grandfather who was a musician, and he played all kinds of stuff at church. This is all in like rural Iowa, and he played trumpet and accordion and piano and violin, just kind of whatever. And he would also make his strangely enough, he had his own diary, like journals that he would draw pictures in, like comic books and stuff, which I didn't know at the time. Like later on, I found out that he was basically making comics himself, which is, I always thought I had control over my life. And I started like, oh, okay, genetic destiny. I didn't know that this was a thing. So anyway, he got sick around the time that I was born, and he gave me a lot of his old gear as far as trumpet and his like an old cornet, and he would teach me how to read music, and he and I would kind of play together. He taught me how to play old marches and things that he played when he was a kid. And that was kind of where my music career started. So I was making comics and writing stories and drawing and playing trumpet all from the age I was like really, really little. So later in life, I decided to pursue music as a career, and I went to college for trumpet, and I went to Eastern Kentucky University for an undergrad, which was hugely important to me. I'd never taken private lessons before. I was pretty good at it because I'd learned when I was very little, but otherwise had no great talent. And in fact, one of the teachers there that became like a mentor to me was still telling the legend of Phillip Kennedy Johnson years after I had left, not because I was especially good, but because I was so bad when I got there. As I just worked so hard and put a ton of work in, and it was really important to me. And since then, I've learned kind of how, like, basically I've learned the important steps in getting any kind of creative career. And first and foremost, you got to be really good at it, right? You've got to get good at it. And like people say, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And I've not found that to be the case. You do have to be part of that community. You have to have, people have to be aware of you. People have to know you exist. But I mean, if you suck, none of that matters, right? Like you have to figure out your craft. And when you've done that, then it matters. Then you have to be part of that community. So like, for example, as a trumpet player, I found that it was not enough to be able to sight read well, or to have fast finger technique, or really great articulation, or to be able to play really high. You have to have a really solid concept of trumpet sound. You can only really get by playing next to somebody who is also really like a warhorse player, like a great trumpet player who kind of figured it out for themselves, that knows what kind of sound that people want to hear in the ensemble. You have to find a really good teacher to study with. And for me, that was Kevin Eisner-nominated at Eastern Kentucky University. And I went there, and I had so much to learn, so far to go, that it was just a really crucial step for me. If I had tried to go someplace like Juilliard, or University of North Texas, or Indiana, or Eastman School of Music, or any of these big, heavy schools out of high school, I never could have hung at those places. Like I was just not up to it. So going to someplace like EKU, where they needed hard workers and people who were, fairly gifted, but there was room to grow, that was a place I really needed in my development. I've also found that another super important part of becoming a professional musician. Sorry, let's see. It looks like Mary Beth got kicked out. Here we go. Another important part of being a professional musician is that you need to put yourself out there in the community, in the industry that you want to be a part of. So EKU was a place where I could go to kind of get my skills where they needed to be. And then for a master's degree, I went to the University of North Texas, which at the time was the biggest music school in the nation. I think it probably still is. And that is a much bigger pond, as they say. And that's like where EKU had a lot of really great musicians and amazing teachers, people who I admire a lot to this day, and I really have a lot of affection for, is a relatively small pond. It's a place where you go to become, well established in that region. And North Texas, where I did my master's, was just a bigger, is like more of an on-ramp to like a more national or international scene. Like there are inroads from North Texas to the Los Angeles recording scene, or the military bands in Washington, D.C., where I am now. Academia, if you want to be a professor of music at a university, there's a lot of inroads there from that. A lot of big bands, jazz ensembles, there's a lot of inroads from North Texas to all that stuff. So it just it's a place to build a rep, which once you have your act together on your, regarding craft, then now you got to build your rep. You got to put yourself out in the community and let your work be judged by the community. That's kind of how you get discovered. And from there, I got found and was invited to join the Glenn Miller Orchestra, and was asked to audition for the Army Field Band in Washington, D.C., where I am now, one of the premier bands in the military. And that's kind of how my music career got going. So after that, first of all, if there are any questions at this point, please, actually, let me jump in the chat, see if anyone's got anything. Looks like no. Feel free to hit me with any questions you've got. So now I'm at that point in my life. I'm like 26, 27. I'm in the Washington, D.C. area playing trumpet for a living in my dream job. It's like an amazing job. And my younger brother, who was also a very talented musician and artist, decided to go the other way. And he wanted to be an artist, professional comic artist specifically. And but he was just a country mouse like me and didn't know how to get started, didn't know where to go. He, in his own words, he said, I don't know shit about shit. Like, I don't know what to do next. Like, what do I do next? We didn't even have the internet to speak of. We're just like a couple of guys, didn't have a decent comic shop close to us. We had to drive to Louisville, which was like hell and gone from where we were growing up. Also, I'm sorry I cuss so much. I know it makes me sound ignorant. I've stopped trying to address it. So I apologize for cursing so much. It's just how it's going to be. So let's see. Yeah, he didn't know what to do. And his grades were never, terrific, and couldn't really afford art school. He was talented, but it's not enough. We didn't know how comics worked. So I was already in the Army, and I was like, well, just move in with me. He called me like in despair. Like, I'm just a loser. I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. And I was like, look, you're super talented, and I don't know what to do either. I don't know how to help you. Like, just move in with me and we'll figure it out together. Like and so he did. He moved in with me in the DC area. And we found out together that the Army has a job called multimedia illustrator, where you literally just draw for the Army and draw and design graphic products for the Army, whether it be advertisements or teaching resources or online resources. They teach you how to use InDesign and Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop and all these software things that you need to make comics anyway. And so he joined the Army with me. Like, he and I, we worked out together every morning, got him in shape, trained him up on the to take the ASVAB to get the scores he needed to do that job. He joined the Army, did 6 years, got out and went to art school in the GI Bill. And the whole time, he and I were going to comic conventions, checking out comic stores. I hadn't read a comic in forever. Like, I'd always read comics growing up. But when I started my music career, I kind of gave all that up, and I wasn't really reading for fun for all through college. I just sold my soul to the practice room, and I just practiced all the time. I didn't care about the things I loved, didn't care about human beings. I was just like, I'm gonna be the best musician ever, and I just like practiced my life away while I was in college. And then when my brother came to visit with me, it kind of freed me up. It's like, now I can actually I can do this again. Like, let's see what comics look like now. Because last time I had read comics, it was like the 90s. So we found this awesome comic store near us, and we explored it together, and just to see what the state of the art had become in the time since I'd been away. And it had taken these huge strides and become this amazing art form. Not that it wasn't great before, but I was just so blown away by the strides that had been taken since I got out of the game. And yeah, we started going to conventions together, figured out how comics were made. I started writing again. I always loved creative writing. I hadn't done it forever. I was just a musician, and that was it for so long. Started writing again. I wrote some stuff for him to illustrate, purely just to give him a portfolio, just to get, because he didn't have any what we call sequential pages, because comics are not just about drawing well. It's also about telling a story through sequential images. Like, you have to, like, if you've ever seen the storyboards that eventually become a movie, like there's always an illustrator that does storyboards before it actually becomes, because before they shoot it on film, so they can visualize the whole thing. That's basically what comics are. And it's a skill that takes practice. So I wanted to give him some sequential pages in his portfolio. So I started writing just to give him a chance to practice. But as we started going to all these conventions, I just completely fell in love with the art form. And I love the collaborative nature of it. I was surprised by how similar to music it is, actually. Small group jazz is very much like making comics. I mean, the big difference is that when you're performing live jazz, like let's say you've got a quartet where it's trumpet, piano, bass, drums, say. If you replace any one member of that group, like the bass is not the most flashy part of that group, but if you replace the bass player, everyone else plays differently as a result. Like everyone, if they're good musicians, their ears are wide open and everyone's adjusting, is reacting to what everyone else around you is doing. And it completely changes the process. And I found comics to be the same way. Comics is a writer, a penciler, an inker, a colorist, a letterer. And if you replace any one role in that team, the whole product changes considerably. If you're working with responsive artists. So yeah, I just really fell in love with it. And after my brother joined the Army, I started looking for other people to work with, and one of those stories became Last Sons of America, my first published book. And then I had kind of accidentally fallen into two careers, and now I don't have time to do anything because I just work all the time. But I am deeply into both my jobs still. I still love my job for the Army. I am very appreciative. We tour the country and honor our veterans. We play live concerts for the American people. We go to a lot of places where the Army does not have a big presence, and we connect America to its Army, let them know that the work their Army's doing on their behalf all around the world and doing the hard thing. Super rewarding. I love that I can do the craft that I studied and practiced so hard to do, not just because I love it or because the music is fun, but for a higher purpose, to honor our veterans and communicate with the American people. So it's a hugely rewarding job. And I also get to make comic books with some of the greatest artists who are alive at this time. I'm writing action comics right now, the Legacy Superman series. I'm writing Marvel's Alien, which is a movie series I loved as a kid. I'm making my own stories as well with my own characters, kind of under the radar right now, that hopefully will come out next year. I get to still just do whatever I want. So like I did when I was a kid, and still get to not study science like I was like I was doing when I was a kid. I guess I've been really blessed to be able to do just whatever I want creatively. If nobody has any questions, I guess the next step here would be for me to show you what putting a comic together looks like. But I would really like to answer any questions that anyone has. If anyone has any kind of questions at all, I'd love to get into that. If there are none, I have some stuff I can get into, but does anyone have anything they want to ask or talk about? Michael asks, have you found any interesting challenges with writing characters that are already established? I didn't. So my first comics were what we call creator owned, where it's original stories. And that's how pretty much everyone gets started in comics. Nobody just shows up with their suitcase in hand and someone's like, you need to write Batman. It doesn't really work like that. You have to prove yourself with your own books first. So that's what I did. I did in 2010, there was this big earthquake in Haiti that happened. And I was doing a lot of anti-human trafficking volunteer work at the time, and kind of thought I knew it all about human trafficking. But I was, listening to the radio about what was happening in Haiti, and there was this mission group from the U.S. that went down to Haiti to ostensibly to find kids who had been orphaned by the earthquake. Because I mean, there wasn't really they didn't have the infrastructure to deal with it. Like if there was an earthquake, in Philadelphia or something, or any urban city in the States, it would be a disaster still, but there would also be infrastructure to help people find each other. And there were places in Haiti in which that was not the case. So this mission group went down there ostensibly to find orphans, people who had been orphaned, and get them families. But they ended up grabbing a lot of kids that still had families down there and trying to smuggle them out of the country. It was super weird. And that kind of sent me down the rabbit hole of learning about the for-profit adoption industry. And I became really interested in that topic. And I learned a lot of stuff that was really surprising. And some of it was kind of upsetting. So that became this passion for me. And I ended up writing this genre story called Last Sons of America, which is kind of a high concept sci-fi thing where Americans can't have kids anymore. And human trafficking kind of becomes the way that we have families after that. And just a way to explore issues like human trafficking and adoption, but dressing it up in comic booky ways that kind of made it more exciting. So that got discovered by DC Comics. And they reached out to me and said, hey, the Justice League editor reached out to me. He's like, hey, I really like this book. Would you want to do something for us? It's like, hell yeah, I've been reading DC Comics since I was a little kid. I was like, cool. We want you to do an Aquaman story for us. And there are these things that they do at DC Comics called inventories. An inventory issue is so there's got to be a Batman story on the shelf every month. Okay. So if the creative team on Batman falls behind, or someone has death in the family, or whatever happens, life gets in the way. So if something happens and they can't meet their deadlines, and we're not going to make a deadline for that book, sometimes there are these inventory issues they can just plug in there and kind of get us caught up again. So it's a good way to try out new people, basically. They're like, we want you to do a 2-issue Aquaman story. And I was like, I love Aquaman. I didn't know anything about Aquaman at all. I hadn't seen anything about Aquaman since I was like a little kid, like watching the Super Friends. I was very ignorant of the character. So I dug up everything I could find on Aquaman and read up everything I could, and just kind of found, because I had to find a way to love the character. I can't write this really lame Aquaman story. I wanted to make him the coolest thing ever. So I read up a lot of Aquaman and found my way in, found things about the character and about the setting that I thought were really, really cool. And I actually found licensed work to be really fun. I didn't know if it would be. I didn't know if writing licensed, what we call licensed characters that already exist and are owned by a big company. I didn't know how fun that would be. I didn't know if it would be, because people come, you hear old guys in the comic industry that are established, they all kind of complain about it. Man, license work, and we got to do the stupid thing just to pay the bills. But that's not how I feel about it at all. Maybe it's because I'm not yet jaded, but I really like playing with these toys that are already kind of in the sandbox before I got there. I had an awesome time working with Aquaman, and because I found aspects of the character and about the setting of Atlantis that I thought were very underserved. I'm like, if I see a place like Atlantis, I don't want it to be just this ordinary place where white guys who speak English, 2 arms, 2 legs, are just swimming around and everything's just like it is on the surface. Like, I want it to look like another planet. Okay. Like, I want world building. I want to see what the architecture looks like. I want to hear what their fragments of their own language are like, what their clothing is like, what their politics are like. Completely different weapons that don't make sense on the surface, but they work down there. Like, I just want to make this whole crazy world. And I felt like the people that were writing Aquaman before me weren't really doing that. So that gave me the opportunity to kind of flex my muscles as far as the world building stuff. Because I'd read all this fantasy growing up, like Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and Ursula K. Le Guin and all these people I just really admired. And I wanted to apply that to these licensed books. I'm kind of doing the same thing on Superman now. Like, I'm trying to blow, I mean, he's somebody who goes from galaxy to galaxy. Like, I don't want to see him hanging out Daily Planet all the time. So I have found licensed books to be really, really fun because it lets me flesh out the parts that I think have been underserved up till now. There's a villain in the Superman books right now called Mongol. And for anyone who has watched the Marvel movies lately, Thanos is the big bad guy, right? That they fight in Infinity War and Endgame. And Mongol is kind of DC's version. In fact, I think he's created by the same guy. I think Jim Starlin created both characters. Mongol is like a lesser version of Mongol, basically. And kind of one-dimensional. There's not a lot of stories with Mongol where you can't just be replaced by some other similarly muscly alien. And that to me strikes me as pretty lame. Like, what makes this character special? Like, what are his motivations? You can't just be evil for no reason. So now I've developed this thing called the War World Saga, in which Superman is going off to another planet called War World, which up till now, War World has always been this Death Star ripoff, just a big shiny planet with guns sticking out of it. It's really lame. In my opinion, sometimes it can be kind of lame, but other times it can be really cool. And I wanted to really flesh it out and make it much more interesting. So now we're making it a world where people live, where the people of War World, the Warzoons, go, galaxy to galaxy and conquer different races, and kill everyone they can and enslave the rest. And it kind of becomes this preserve for all these species who are basically endangered now because of what they've done. Like this preserve for endangered species all across the galaxy and the universe, really. It's just all this room to go nuts creatively. So I found licensed work to be really, really fulfilling in similar ways to how my own creator-owned work has been fulfilling. So I really love writing licensed books. I'm trying to do both. I'm trying to not get too sidetracked. Like lately, I've just been doing nothing but Superman and Alien and Red Sonja and like licensed characters. And I'm trying to get back into creator-owned comics now. But I'm having a great time with the licensed stuff too. Someone asks if I found superheroes in comics a useful medium in engaging relevant social issues in your books. Yeah, I try not to set out. Okay, I heard another writer one time field a question in which somebody asked, should I try to put a lot of myself into my stories directly? And he said, no, because you'll do that anyway. Like you shouldn't set out to like, I'm going to tell a story about whatever, Donald Trump or human trafficking or guns in America or the border. Or if you do it like too blatantly, like on its face, I find that it comes across kind of preachy and kind of insulting. But if you just kind of tell a good story, I find that the things you care about tend to come out anyway. For example, Last Sons of America that I mentioned already, that story is on its face about adoption and human trafficking, but it wasn't like, I'm going to solve this problem in my comic book. It was just this story that I could not tell. Like I had this idea that really just kind of set me on fire, and I had to get it out there. And in the process, I told the story about the thing that meant a lot to me, but I felt like it doesn't come across as a sermon, I hope. After that, my next story was Warlords of Appalachia. And that was about the political divisions happening in our country at that time. That came out October 2016. And it was all about how I was watching America kind of get divided. And it's a love letter to Kentucky, where I grew up. There's a lot about Kentucky in that book, warts and all. There's a little jab at UK basketball in there. Don't come at me. I love UK basketball. I'm just like the way it's got that cult status where there's a lot of things about about Kentucky that I wanted to say in a comic book, and it wasn't. I didn't want it to come across like a sermon. I want it to be like a love letter, and I find that the things that you want to tell kind of come out on their own. Edward has a question. Oh, sorry, Edward, you're muted. Can you? Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Hey.
We joined a tad late, and I was wondering. I thought I heard you say you're from the Louisville area.
I'm from. I went to high school in Spencer County, and I went to EKU for undergrad.
Okay. Well, the reason I was asking was a century ago. Well, it was at least in the previous century, when I was an undergraduate at UK. There was a fellow in my group called Don Rosa from Louisville, who ended up as a comic artist for Disney. He did the Donald Duck thing, and he's written a book about his time, doing licensed characters, but he also was the individual who showed Donald Duck in the Temple of Doom prior to it ever being put on film. And I didn't know if you had run into Don at any point. He had been in the business for a long time and found it very difficult and went back to being in the family's stone business. They quarried stone and that sort of thing. So he dropped out of that. I was just wondering about your experiences and influences. You said you saw comics, you didn't really get involved with the genre other than as a reader, and then later on becoming, when your brother moved in with you. And I was just wondering who the influences that you've mentioned one or two, but I was kind of interested in that.
Yeah, sure. So my influences as who my heroes are as far as writing.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for your question. I have books that Don did, actually. I don't know him at all, but I have so when my dad was bringing those comics back from, flea markets or whatever, they kind of became three big piles. Like a lot of them were DC comics, like Batman, Superman, the team up books, World's Finest and Brave and the Bold, which are typically Batman and Superman also together, or the Batman family or the Superman family. And they were old by the time I even saw them. They were much older than they weren't coming out when I was, a kid. And there was another pile that was mostly Marvel, like Spider-Man team ups and a few Avenger things, some Captain America stuff. And then there was like a cartoony pile that was kind of the books that would later become DuckTales on TV, like Donald Duck, Scrooge McDuck, Beagle Boys, Huey, Dewey, Louie. There's some other ones too that are not part of that, like Baby Huey and Richie Rich and whatever else. And I would kind of go on a streak where I would just read the one thing. Like I would just consume all the DC stuff, and that was my kick for a while. And then I'd get all, one of the Scrooge McDucks would kind of catch my eye, and I'd read all those. And Don Rosa did some of that stuff. My influences as a writer, and that's actually something I want to talk about too. I don't know if anyone here is a hopeful writer or creative, but I'm going to speak for a moment as if someone is. Hopefully, someone is. I would say it's important for everyone to figure out who your influences are, like what inspire. Like, if you want to be a writer, who inspires you to be a writer? Who do you read? That's like, this is so incredible. I have to do this myself. I want to be this. For me, those people are the guy that created the Hellboy universe, Mike Mignola. He has an incredible style I really admire as an illustrator, but also as a writer. I love his work. He's got this crazy Gothic modern fairy tale kind of approach to work that I really just love. The crime writer, Ed Brubacher, who's also a comic guy. Ed is in Captain America, the Winter Soldier. That's the second Captain America movie, because he created the Winter Soldier. So the Captain America story has always had Bucky, the teenage sidekick. The reason that a lot of those old comics have a teenage sidekick is because they wanted the reader to put themselves in the story. Like the target audience back then would have been, young boys. So like, let's give Batman a little kid in a colorful suit with no pants, and like everyone can pretend they're Robin. And like a lot of characters had that. Like even Superman had like a super boy, like a son for a long time. There was like a young Batman and a young Superman. This is way back in the day. For Captain America, that was Bucky, who, in the comics was a teenager, which didn't make any sense because he had a machine gun, was killing Nazis left and right. But part of Cap's origin is that Bucky died. Like when Cap went into the ice, Bucky was dead. And that was sacrosanct for years. Like, you can't bring Bucky back. Everyone knows Bucky's dead. But then Ed Brubacher figure out a crazy origin where he was also rescued and became this crazy brainwashed spy thing. So anyway, Ed Brubacher was the guy who created the Winter Soldier. And since then he's become this crime writer that's done these unbelievable crime, like pulp crime novels, basically, but in comic book form. And he's just the best. I love that guy. There's another writer named Rick Remender that I really admire. There's a guy, Scott Snyder, who has become like a real mentor to me. Scott wrote a series called Batman Court of Owls. that to me is like a masterclass on how you write like a licensed book. Like that book is so well done. And he was a novelist before he did comics. He has a book of short fiction I really admire called Voodoo Heart. Scott's my hero. And now we're friends. It's really cool. Like he's been kind of a mentor to me in comics. Outside of comics, I really love the crime novels, like the prose novels of Elmore Leonard. I think he's like just the best. His dialogue is famous for being incredible. He's also famous for he's described himself as just leaving out the parts that people skip. Like if you read a lot of novels, there's like sometimes you get to a tedious place. Like I love Tolkien. Okay. But he describes a lot of scenery that you just don't need. And so there's parts where I'll get to the thing where he's talking about the hills and all that. And I'll be like, okay, moving on. And I'll get down to the dialogue. And Leonard is kind of the one that gave me permission to skip all that stuff. Now I find his prose much more inviting. Cormac McCarthy also, who is nothing like Elmore Leonard, but he's got this unbelievably beautiful and dark, bleak stuff that also really speaks to me. Yeah, I guess those are my big influences. So I would say find whoever your influences are, the people who, if you have to just consume everything that Louis L'Amour ever did, then cool, that's your guy. If you prefer, if instead you're Ian Fleming or, J.K. Rowling, or whoever, it doesn't matter who it is. Find the people that you really admire, that you want to emulate. And just at first I would suggest just blatantly mimicking what they do. I think you should just take some time to directly imitate your heroes. And as you make more and more content, you'll find yourself making changes and kind of finding your own voice without even really trying. I think it's perfectly fine to put out write a short story in the style of your favorite author and try to make it just like them. Same thing for music. If you really love the guitar playing of John Williams, not the composer John Williams, but like there's a guitarist by that name too. If that guy's playing just really speaks to you, just straight up rip their stuff and try to sound just like them until you kind of start to find your own voice. Same with woodworking or anything else, any kind of creative pursuit. Just imitate your heroes until you find your own voice, in my opinion. Let's see. Donna had a question. She says, I draw original one-panel cartoons, something you might find in a newspaper's daily comic. That's awesome. With your experience in comics, what advice can you give to cartoonists? Are there any books you can recommend to help develop this form of art? There's not necessarily a book I can recommend. There's a little cartoon strip actually that I want to show you. Donna, throw in the chat, do you know a series of a comic strip called Zen Pencils? And if not, I highly recommend it. It's pretty amazing. I'm going to show you a Zen Pencils right now and read it to you aloud like a child. So I still have something to do. Let's see. Okay, I will now share my screen. Okay, hopefully you can see this cartoon now. So this is a Zen Pencil strip. Nobody tells people who are beginners. Sorry, let me back up. So this is a person who takes excerpts from impactful speeches or articles or things and basically sets them to art and tells stories using these quotes. So this is one of those. Nobody tells people who are beginners is that all of us who do creative work, we get into it because we have good taste. But there's a gap. For the first couple of years, what you're making isn't so good. It's trying to be good. It has ambition to be good, but it's not quite that good. But your taste, the thing that got you into the game, is still killer. And your taste is good enough that you can tell what you're making is kind of a disappointment to you. Man, I can relate to that for sure. A lot of people never get past that phase. A lot of people at that point, they quit. Everybody who does interesting creative work went through a phase of years where they had really good taste, but they could tell what they were making wasn't as good as they wanted it to be. They knew it fell short. It didn't have that special thing that we wanted it to have. Everybody goes through that. It's totally normal. And the most important possible thing you can do is a lot of work. Do a huge volume of work. Put yourself on a deadline so that every week or every month, you know you're going to finish one story. Because it's only by actually going through a volume of work that you're going to catch up and close that gap. And the work you're making will be as good as your ambitions. It's going to take you a while. It's normal to take a while. You just have to fight your way through. That's my Ira Glass. But the strip is Zen pencils. And I met the creator, whose name escapes me, at a convention, and they eventually bound these books filled with those strips. Highly recommend you check that out. As far as I know, it started out as just a webcomic, these big like vertical strips that you can just read through. I found those to be very inspiring, and I like the style of the work. I think it's pretty cool. So yeah, I don't know of a specific book I can give you to help develop your style, but I would just say look up what other people are doing. Put yourself in that community. Find out what other people are making stories that speak to you, that do things like what you want to do, and just immerse yourself in that and try to imitate the ones that you like the best. Yeah, I would also add, I can't tell you how many people I've met who in theory want to make a thing and just never do it. They just don't finish. They say, I'm a writer, and they have this theoretical story in their head that they've never actually put on paper, and which means it's just nothing. Like, it's an idea and that's cool, but it's not enough. You have to put it down. So I found the creative process of making a book, as far as satisfaction and fun, to be this gigantic U. Okay. So it's like, it starts out and you're like, I've got this awesome idea and it's so exciting and I can't wait to finish it. And you're just like writing down, like you're just regurgitating, you're just like spewing words onto the page, and it's so easy and beautiful and fun. And then you have to actually break the story and make it like work in a form way. You have to make it really good. It's not enough to have the idea, like, well, what happens next? Or you hit this roadblock, like, crap, I hadn't thought about this part. And then you have to really develop it and make it work as a story. And then as you get closer to the end and you're almost done, it's getting pretty good. It gets to be like B-, B+, it's almost done. Now it gets exciting again. You're like, yeah, I've almost got this awesome thing. You've got to work through the bottom of that U. You got to work out of that trough, because 95, 98, 99% of people don't. Okay. I'm sorry, but those people are not writers. They have a cool idea. They're not writers yet. You've got to fight through it. And if you take one thing from this entire hour, I would say, finish it. Finish what you're making, even if it's terrible. You have to embrace the shitty first draft. Okay. When you do the first draft, it's not going to be good. It's just not. I mean, if it is, that's awesome. Congratulations. Mine are not. All right. When I do my first draft, they're terrible. And a lot of my favorite writers say the same thing. Like, the first draft is not that good. And the second draft is where you start to make it look like, Neil Gaiman has said, the second draft is where you make it look like you knew what you were doing all along. And you're still not done. Okay. You got third, fourth, fifth. Like, when you actually send a rough draft, quote unquote, rough draft to the editor, nobody should see your rough draft. Nobody. Okay. The actual rough draft should be the best that you can do after like the fifth draft. Like, you should be editing and revising the whole time, making it as good as you can possibly make it. And then you send it to somebody for revisions. Like, okay, now you're showing it to an editor or a publisher or an agent or an artist, if you're doing a comic or whatever. They're seeing something you've already polished a good bit, hopefully. So I would just say, embrace the shitty first draft. Finish it. You've got to finish it, because nobody else does. If you finish your first project, if you just finish the script part of it, or the rough draft of the screenplay or the novel or whatever, you're already ahead of like everybody, man, because nobody finishes their work. They just have these really fun ideas that they kind of have in their head or on their phone or on a notebook, or they just never go anywhere. And that's where most people who want to be writers, that's where they kind of finish up. You've got to finish. So yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? You're welcome, Donna. Thanks for that awesome question. Lydia, you have a question. Forgive me, you're muted. Yeah, you're good now, I think. No, still muted.
Okay.
Oh, there you go.
I'm going to do a 90-degree turn here and go back to your music.
Sure.
Are you a composer?
I am.
Have you thought about composing themes for your characters in your comic books?
I've done that.
Good.
Let's see. Sorry, I have some on my teeth here. Let me pull up YouTube. I'm going to drop my YouTube, like a video in the chat. Don't watch it yet though, because it's gonna be noisy. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, I don't write themes for like Superman or whatever, but I do. I really love. Okay, so you're gonna hear me say Neil Gaiman's name again and again because I really admire Neil Gaiman. He's one of my favorite writers. And it's not necessarily the word craft of it. It's not that he's a bad writer. He's amazing, but there are other people whose writing just is inspiring with how articulate they are. With Neil Gaiman, it's just his raw storytelling chops, how beautiful his stories can be. He wrote American Gods, which is one of my favorite novels. He wrote the long ongoing comic series Sandman. He's written a lot of other really great comics, but he's also written screenplays and kids' books I read to my son, and novels, books of short stories, episodes of Doctor Who, whatever. And early in his career, he was told, somebody gave him the advice, you got to find your niche, you got to find your thing. Are you going to be a crime writer? Are you going to be a kids' book writer? Are you going to be a comic writer? Are you going to be a screenwriter? What's your thing? Because that's how people are going to know you. What's your thing? Find your niche. And he was like, be gone. Like he pushed back against that hard because he wanted to do all the things I just mentioned. He wanted to do all those things and not sacrifice any of it. And that is exactly how I feel. I want to do whatever I want. And I do whatever I want. I'm writing a kid's book right now that I have no doubt will be published because now I got that leg up in comics and now people are going to pay attention where they might not have before. Even if nobody wants it, I'm going to put it on Kickstarter and I'm going to do it myself. I've got a great illustrator that's drawn it. I've got work that's getting developed for film right now. There's all kinds of stuff I want to do. And one of the things that I really liked that I saw Neil Gaiman do was he wrote this story. Oh man, it's got a super interesting title. Something like The Truth is a Cave in the Black Mountains or something like that. It's some creepy title like that, but it's really cool. And it's basically a picture book. It was illustrated by, I am the worst with names. He's the artist on From Hell with Alan Moore. I forget his name. Really cool style. And he painted, I think, hand painted these illustrations, this really awesome, really creepy book. And the point of the book, before it was actually a book, it was like a performance. So Neil Gaiman actually read his own work. He's got a really cool voice. He tends to read a lot of his own audiobooks. He did this thing in, I want to say, Sydney Opera House, where he gave a live reading of the story that he wrote. And there are images illustrated by this great artist were on this big screen behind him, and the music played. It was this big experience. It wasn't just a book, they made a book later that I own, but it started out with this other awesome thing. And I was like, man, I just want to do that. I want to do that. So I have written music that goes along with some of my books. I've not yet had, I don't have enough of it yet to put like a whole concert that way. But at some point I will. I wrote a web comic that's on my personal website called The Lost Boys of the U-Boat Bremen, which is like a period horror piece about these. It's like at the end of World War II when Germany was drafting like old men and teenagers to fill their armies and U-boats because they were running out of people. And there's a U-boat filled with these kids basically, and the U-boat gets sunk and is stuck on the bottom of the English Channel. And there's some horrible thing on board with them. They don't know what it is. It's kind of like Ridley Scott's Alien meets Lord of the Flies on a U-boat. It's pretty dark and depressing, but it's also really fun and exciting. And I wrote some music to go with it. And at some point I will have a live performance of that piece with live narration and music, and the screen will show the art in the background. It's something I'm building to. But anyway, I digress. I'm gonna pull up my YouTube channel. How do I do this? My videos? Yeah, here we go. Okay. So I did this series for DC Black Label called The Last God. And I made these trailers for it. Oh man, that was taking me to the editor. It's not what I want. Anyway, all right, I give up. So go to, if you want to hear some of this music, you can find my YouTube channel under my full name, and you can find trailers 1, 2, and 3 for The Last God, and you'll see art from the book, and you'll hear music that I wrote for the book as well, that is playing as you're watching these trailers of the artwork. So I meant them as like advertisements, but the music that you're hearing is they're excerpts from larger pieces that are also out there. So yeah, I like the idea of joining different kinds of art together and making these awesome performances. Just so everyone knows, so I'm still in the Army, and right before I got on this thing, I had a combat fitness test that when I got here, I was all sweaty and still in uniform. I was like, hey, just give me a few minutes. I've got to haul it out of here at 1 o'clock sharp because I'm about to grade someone else's test. So please keep the questions coming. At 1 o'clock, I got to go. But if your question does not get answered, sincerely, I love teaching. I love talking about craft. I love helping people with their process. So if you have questions for me that do not get addressed in the chat today, don't get addressed by 1 o'clock, please reach out to me on social media. I'm easy to find, and ask me your questions there. You can send me a direct message on Twitter. You can find me on Facebook Messenger. If we don't have any friends in common, just like send me a message like, hey, I was on the chat or whatever, and I can you can leave me a message on my YouTube videos, whatever, and I'll do whatever I can to help you with any questions you've got. Any other questions? That's really cool that Donna does cartoons. I'm sorry, what?
Well, if you want to put in the chat real quick, just your full, put your name, the Twitter and YouTube information.
Yeah.
That we'll share that with everybody. That'd be great.
Sure. I am not super good at, I honestly kind of hate social media, and I'm not very good at it. I don't post that much. I post every day because I'm trying to advertise my stuff, but I don't enjoy it. So I sorry if I'm not as responsive as I ought to be, but I do get back to questions.
Does anybody else have any other questions or anything else they want to ask Philip while he's typing that in?
Here we go. Let me find my YouTube channel. I feel like I should be able to do this. Lee, go ahead, and if you see anybody while I'm doing this, go ahead and call them out, please.
I think we're good. I liked Alien is one of my favorite series.
Cool.
So I'm very interested in to see comics ahead and the direction you take it. It's
Thank
such
you
an
so much.
iconic
Have you
film.
been reading the series?
No, I'm going to, like, my children are really into comics and they create their own comics. And I was into comics as in my childhood. My grandparents bought them for me. So sounds like I need to get back to it.
Yeah, the publisher called Dark Horse did sorry, here I'm dropping in my YouTube channel. Hopefully that works. You'll be able to get in there and see a couple of really old videos of me playing trumpet and some trailers for the books, including Warlords of Appalachia. I actually wrote a lot of music for Warlords of Appalachia as well, like kind of mountainy melodies. And the sheet music is in the books, which is kind of fun. Anyway, so Alien, I love that series, and I felt like one failing of the Dark Horse approach over time was that they got super creative, which is amazing, but they also kind of built upon their own lore to the point where it became almost like an alternate universe to the films. Like the films felt like their own canon, and the comics kind of felt like its own canon as well. They kind of didn't feel like they belonged in the same universe. And now that Marvel has, like when Marvel got the license to Alien, they reached out like, hey, we want you to write this. Well, actually, first I saw the advertisement that Marvel had the license, and I reached out to the editor because I'm an Alien maniac. And I told him like what a huge fan I am. I was like, ask me anything right now. I'm a huge, like, I know anything. Like I've been training my whole life for a race I never knew was coming. And they're like, damn, you seem really excited about this. And there was actually somebody in the office already apparently who was pitching me to do it. And so that just kind of came together, and they made me the writer for it. And my mission statement of those books is to make it feel like the movies. Like I want it to belong on the shelf alongside the Alien films, so that fans of the films can go and read the comic and and get fan service and not have to read all these generations of Dark Horse books that came out too. I want it to be a part of the movie franchise again. So yeah, if you like those films, you'll dig these books, I think. Number 8, I think, comes out next week. The first 6 are one arc, Alien 1 through 6. And actually that trade paperback came out today. So if you want to get caught up, I would buy the first trade paperback that just hit shelves. And for any Superman fans, I know there's a lot of news about Superman the other day, and there's actually 2 Supermen in DC Comics right now. There's Clark Kent, who is the legacy character, and then there's Jonathan Kent, who in the comics right now is Superman's son. And a lot of the news that's been going on right now is actually in relation to, like, looks like some sensationalized article titles and stuff, but it's not quite what they're saying it is. So if you want to read any of my Superman work, I'm writing the Clark Kent story in Action Comics, which is the legacy series. Superman was first introduced in Action Comics #1 back in the day, and they're still running it. So my first issue of Action Comics was like issue, 1029 was the one that I came on board with, and 1036 comes out in a couple of weeks. And the next issue out of of Action Comics is issue 1 of the War World Saga, in which Superman sets out to liberate the planet of War World. And this big, crazy science fiction epic. It's like John Carter, Warlord of Mars, in the context of Superman. It's pretty fun. Yeah. Any other questions, please? Anything I can do to help you with your own goals? Or
I think we're getting to the time where you have to run off. And first, I want to thank Philip. Thank you for your time. This was so interesting. I loved hearing every moment of it. I also want to thank our sponsors, Deal and Stuart Powell, and Lydia and Ed are here today, and they asked terrific questions. So Lydia and Ed, thank you for being so supportive of the Lunch with the Arts. We're so appreciative of both of you.
You know what? I'm so sorry. We have 3 more minutes, and there's something I wanted to do that we never got to.
Oh,
Real quick. I just can't help but make myself late. There's stuff I want to share. So when I was asked to do Aquaman, I never got into that. So they were like, do Aquaman. I'm like, I don't know anything about Aquaman. So I read everything. And then I gave them this pitch, which looks like this idea for a story called Ghosts. Far from Atlantis, Aquaman and Mera is his wife, are exploring an undiscovered stretch of ocean floor where Aquaman intends to build an ambitious new city. Blah, blah, blah. 20 years later, the city of Crownspire has become a reality and is now the capital city of Atlantis. Aquaman and Mera are the beloved king and queen, and the other members of the fabled Justice League of old come to Crownspire to celebrate the coming of age ceremony of their son, Tom. Blah, blah, blah. But beneath the surface, assassins and saboteurs have infiltrated Crownspire, intent on destroying it. So it's this big kind of flash forward to the future story about what might happen if Aquaman realizes his dream of unifying the surface world in Atlantis with this new city called Crownspire. They went for it, and then I sent them what's called breakdowns, which is when it's like an outline but very detailed. So it's like page by page to make sure that the story you have can fit into the space allotted. Because comics is all about, like, you've got a page number that you've got to hit. If you got 20 pages to get this across, or 40 pages or whatever. If you got a story that's really, really, really awesome, but it's 50 pages, they can't use it. So I gave them these breakdowns. Share screen. Hopefully this is what you're seeing. Yeah. So for example, page 1, you see the one right here. Arthur and Mira are swimming underwater. I guess that's super redundant. Accompanied by 2 large luminescent fish for light. Arthur finally reveals the reason for the journey. He intends for Atlantis to not only be a part of the international community, but a global superpower. Blah, blah, blah. Page 2 and 3. They look out on the picturesque site of Arthur's new city. Number 3, their fish companions swim into this fissure and don't return. Page 4, 20 years later, the city Arthur spoke of in the intro is now a reality. Okay, so since we're crunched for time, that's what I'll show you. So that went to the artist, okay, whose name is Max Fiumara. He's from, I want to say, I can't remember, Argentina, I think. Super great artist. At that point, he started making, so the Justice League appears in this story. And he did a lot of character designs, like how the characters are going to look different. Let me show you that. So here's his character design for Superman. This is basically Superman. He's just older. Wonder Woman. Oh my God. Share screen. Here's Diana. Again, basically just Diana. And then Hal Jordan, who was he's the Green Lantern character. Doggone it. Technology, do what I tell you. I am the worst at this. Sorry, I'm not seeing it. Here we go. I want to see Hal Jordan, who's over it, who's past the pageantry of the costumes and all that. Now he just wears his old bomber jacket. He's got, at some point in the past 20 years, his arm has been ripped off, and he just makes himself a new one with his Green Lantern powers now. So that's Hal Jordan. Stop share. And then he started taking the pages that I sent him in the script and drawing them up. And I'll show you what those look like. Aquaman Layout #1. So this is just a layout. It's just a very, very basic kindergarten-like version of a drawing. I'm not seeing the zoom. It's impossible how bad I am at this. Okay, share. There. So there's just what we call a thumbnail or a layout. And then here's the layouts for pages 2 and 3. Shows where all the word balloons are going to go. Pages 4 and 5. And this is after the big time jump, and you see the city that he wants to create. There's Crown Spire and all that. We see the heroes coming to see them. So that's after we approve those thumbnails or layouts, then he turns into pencils. And now it starts to take shape. Much tighter, obviously. It takes a lot more time to do art like that. Now, because I'm definitely going to be late to my thing, I'm going to put up pages 4 and 5. You can see what Crown Spire looks like. There's the city of Crown Spire as built by Aquaman 20 years later. And the Justice League shows up for the celebration at Superman, Wonder Woman, and Hal Jordan, the former Green Lantern. So then the letterer will do his work. We'll drop in the letters while the colorist does their step independently. So the colorists will do their own thing without the letters, and the letterer will do their thing without the colors. And then it all kind of comes together into a finished, oh my God. Until a finished comic book. Like so. So in this case, the penciler also inks their own work with the pencils, and they'll go over his own work with inks, either digitally or with actual, pen and ink. I can't remember which step. I can't remember. I think Max does his traditionally. And then, sorry, the pages are actually split up into 2 here. This is the left page. This is page 4. And then page 5. So it goes like the first panel goes across the top of both pages. You see Crown Spire across the top. And there's the other half. And then here's the Justice League and their modern iteration or future iteration. And that is how a comic book is born. Yeah, I wanted to show you that little bit of the process. I really have to go. I'm so sorry, but please reach out to me online if you have any more questions. It's been a pleasure. I hope everyone has an awesome time with this series. It was an honor to be part of it, and yeah, hope to come back. Mary Beth, Lee, thank you so much for making this happen.
Thank you. This was great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Good luck,
guys.
Phillip.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. If you want to exit by hitting the end button on the bottom right screen, we are so appreciative, and we hope to see you next week at Lunch with the Arts, which will be Sarah Eggy in person here at the Art Center in the main gallery. Right? Look forward to seeing you then.